Welcome back to the show, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, heroes and villains. I'm your host, Deshaun Fauntleroy. I know your time is precious, so we're going to get right into today's show. In today's show, the big idea is Dr. Benjamin Wax. Who is Dr. Benjamin Wax? Show notes, links, conversation, and more at sportsmastery.com/56. Dr. Benjamin Wax is a performance and leadership coach who assists people in making profound shifts in their lives through one-on-one coaching, leadership groups, and speaking engagements. As a member of the John Maxwell team, his group has worked with major companies from Chick-fil-A, Microsoft, Southwest Airlines to training programs impacting our youth in the school system. He received his PhD from the University of Mississippi and his master's and bachelor's degrees from Mississippi State University. In addition to working with companies and clients, Dr. Wax has other business holdings such as real estate, cattle, and is a professor at a major Southeastern Conference school. He has published several articles in sport performance and presented at conferences throughout the world. Dr. Wax's background includes several powerlifting and bodybuilding titles. His powerlifting titles include the APF Men's World Powerlifting National Champion, APF Junior World Powerlifting Champion, American Drug-Free Collegiate National Champion, World Men's American Drug-Free Powerlifting Champion, Teenage American Drug-Free Powerlifting Champion, and Mississippi's ADFPA and APA Champion, to name a few. His bodybuilding titles include the NPC Collegiate National Bodybuilding Championship, Southern Bodybuilding Championship, and Mississippi Bodybuilding Championship, and a host of other titles. As you can see, ladies and gentlemen, we have brains and bronze coming on to the show. This isn't a massive play, but it is a deep one. So I'm going to front load this show. Today, we're going to be discussing what is leadership? Who needs leadership? Why should we develop our leadership skills? What are 2 ways to develop our leadership skills? And when should we begin developing our leadership skills? Without further ado, I want to bring on Dr. Benjamin Wax to the Sports Mastery Podcast. Dr. Wax, how's your day going?
Deshaun, first and foremost, thank you for having me on the show. I am certainly excited and have been looking forward to speaking to your audience, and day is going great.
You know, I really appreciate you taking the time to come on the show with you being a professor. You know, I know you sit on different strength and conditioning boards, National Strength and Conditioning Association. You know, I really feel like this is going to be a good show. This will be an in-depth show on leadership. You know, I'm reading John Maxwell's book, The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. I'm on law number 4, but I want to jump back to number 3, the law of process. Leadership develops daily, not in a day. What does that mean to you, Ben?
You know, it's no different than when you speak to individuals as it relates to training, meaning that it is a process, and individuals focus on doing the things day to day, whether it is in the realm of, let's say, academics, right? The studying,
yes,
the preparation that you put in on a daily basis, whether it's in the realm of performance. I was just viewing a show yesterday. I think it was this Undisputed, and they were showing that LeBron James is already back in the gym training and getting ready for next season. And here's someone who is the best in the world and just coming off of a season competing, of course, in the NBA championship. And yet, less than a month later, he's back in there training. And so, in order for leadership to be developed, it is to be looked upon as a process, an ongoing process that we're growing daily, monthly, yearly to become the best possible leader that we can become.
You know, I agree with that 100%, man. You know, I tell one of my student athletes that, you know, this kid he just finished his freshman year in high school. He'll be a sophomore next year, and he's taken 2 summer school math classes. So next year as a sophomore, he'll be in pre-calculus. You know, our goal right now is to have him taking a college math his senior year, you know, but I explained to him, this is the process. During this this year, you're going to take the pre-SAT, pre-ACT. Next year, you're going to take the SAT twice. If we could squeeze the ACT in there twice, we're going to do that. And then you're going to do that the same, going into your senior year, as far as taking the true exams, to have him prepared and going through this process so he'll be ready 100% when it comes to clearing that NCAA clearinghouse and just being ready, to compete academically at the collegiate level.
That sounds great. And this young man is very fortunate to have someone such as yourself, a mentor who already has a process laid out, a proven process that he can follow. And I think that is great that he is doing that and that you're impacting him in that way to be prepared for the things that are yet to come in his life.
Now, Dr. Wax, I know you're on the John Maxwell board. I recently purchased his book, The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. I know I have, I think I have another one by him. What is it? How Great People Think or something like that. It's a small book. Haven't touched on that book in a while.
Yes. Yes.
Does that ring a bell?
People think. It certainly does. Yeah. I mean, there is a thought process. That's what separates us, right? It begins with our thought process before we actually begin the actions. And so, let's say this same young man who is following your leadership, who's following your advice and your input. You have a lot of people, and I'm sure you've encountered these individuals. You speak to them, you encourage them, you lay out the process, but because of their thinking, or as they used to say back in the old days, thinking, they don't follow that process, and they don't have that same successful outcome. And then later in life, they wonder what went wrong, and or they wish they would have listened to the input and guidance you were trying to give them. With the correct thinking process that this young man has, he's following your input, following your advice to lead him to this successful outcome. And that's the same way with leaders. We know, like, for instance, when a team is struggling, they don't get rid of the entire team. They generally fire the coach and replace the coach, and they bring in new thinking, new optimism, a new way of doing things in an attempt to have the team, the university, the school, the program be successful.
Yes, I wanted to dive into leadership itself. What is leadership? How would you define leadership? What could you tell our audience in terms of athletes, the parents listening, and other coaches listening to this podcast, Dr. Wax?
Webster Dictionary defines leadership as an office, title, or position of a person. I personally define leadership as influence. Nothing less, nothing more. Think about the people who've made an impact and a difference in your life. Most people, when I ask this question, they're going to say a coach, a mentor, my mom, my grandparents, someone from the community, someone from their local church. Those are, so influence is what I generally think of. And I reminisce when I think back. You remember the cameras after Golden State had just won a championship, and they were following Kevin Durant, and one of the first people that he was going out to embrace, actually at half court, was his mother. If you remember that shot, someone who had been there for him his entire life, who had groomed him and had made a difference in who he is today, and they were sharing his first championship moment together. And so there are different levels of influence and thus different levels of leaders. And we have identified with the Maxwell Company 5 different levels of leadership. First, the most basic, what we call a level 1 leader, is someone who is a positional leader, meaning they're placed in their position. This can be a supervisor, a boss. And people generally follow these individuals at the very basic level because they have to. They have certain rules and regulations that they have to adhere to, and or it can even be a parent, right? Or living in someone's home. You're in their home, you have to follow their rules. A level 2 leader, this is more or less the permission, as we referred to, and or relationships being developed. And people follow you because they want to. They actually like the leader. They like the person, and thus they follow their leadership. At level 3, we look at production, results. People are going to follow you because of what you've done for the organization. Level 4, we call this the people development level. People follow you because of what you've done for them and because of the way you've impacted them, and also keeping in mind those other levels be maintaining and being intact, they'll follow you. But the highest level of leadership is what we refer to as the pinnacle level. People follow you because of who you are and what you represent. I mean, think about this. Think about the feelings you get when I say Dr. Martin Luther King, Muhammad Ali, Reverend Billy Graham, Walt Disney, Coach Bear Bryant, Coach Eddie Robinson, and I can just go on and on. People who have climbed up all of the various levels and have excelled in their chosen field to even supersede their field. Many people, for instance, love and admired Muhammad Ali that didn't even like boxing. But yet, because of what he came to represent, as someone who was more than just an athlete, who actually fought for social injustice, who stood on his beliefs, who was willing to even lose his title and go to jail because of his religious beliefs, people admire that. At the time, they didn't, but in retrospect, they admire that, and he's forever going to be honored because of his actions.
Right. When I think of those people that you mentioned, Dr. Wax, the first thing I think of is like thought leaders. I think of charisma. Those were people that you have to listen to. You know what I mean? And they made an impact on the world. So I can really appreciate you mentioning those people when it comes to leadership. Ladies and gentlemen, and boys and girls, if you're listening to this, there's different levels to leadership. There's positional leadership, somebody that might just be put in a position as a president, a manager, a coach, a head football coach, a strength and conditioning coach. So sometimes you might be put in a position of leadership, or you might have that title, but is it really leadership? Then you have, permissional leadership as far as developing, being able to develop relationships. You have people that, they can produce, they provide results. You have people development. But as Dr. Wax said, the pinnacle level is that. You have to be and those were the people that he was mentioning. Dr. Wax, would you mind discussing that pinnacle level one more time?
Yes, and I want to preference it by saying, each particular level builds upon one another. And what I mean by that, let me throw out a name. Let's say Lance Armstrong. Here is someone who is an athlete, had built up a team, and had climbed up those levels of leadership and became a force in society by representing his overcoming cancer and all the things that he had done. However, when he violated one of the law of trust, right, and people began to find out some of the things that he did to achieve that particular level of excellence in his field, how he treated people, and all of that came out, he actually, of course, as we know, fell down and lost his leadership position. So I want everyone to understand that first, whether it's an athlete or someone being named as a coach, you are put in that level 1, right? That position. You're given that opportunity, and then you begin to build by developing relationships, moving up that particular ladder, having production by producing results, reproduction level, and then that level 5, you begin to represent something bigger than yourself. And that's the hardest level to reach. And that level takes time, and it actually takes patience being able to do that particular level. But it's great when you reach that level, because when you're at level 5, you're actually beginning to produce level 4 leaders. You're putting people in position to do the same. We go back to Dr. Martin Luther King. Look at John Lewis, who came out of his particular movement, who is still, of course, in the Senate today, fighting to get passage, fighting for rights, fighting for equality, and all of these various things. And that came, of course, out of the leadership of Dr. Martin Luther King and a host of other people that participated in that particular movement. So just as an example, at that particular level, you're also in that level not only of impacting society, your inner circle, but also reproduction of other level 4 leaders who have the opportunity to climb up to be a level 5 leader.
I got to say, man, just the fact that me being introduced to you, me having the opportunity to purchase John Maxwell's book, The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, and just reading the preface and getting into these early chapters is definitely changing my views of leadership. One, how I look at myself, and then two, how I look at other people. Going back to high school, man, I was in the 9th grade, and I had a freshman football coach, and he was a white guy, Jim Wernstein. He's one of those guys that had glasses and they looked like they were always a shade of blue. He was a thin guy, probably belt buckle was probably 2 inches above where it should have been. So he had this eccentric look to him. But he used to
sounds like my high school coach.
He used to always say, Fauntleroy, you're a leader. And I never knew what he's talking about. But I've been figuring that out all of these years. You're a leader, and playing sports, I was always like, I led by example, and then within the last 10 years, I've developed, more of a vocal leadership presence, but people can talk loud. Doesn't necessarily mean that you're a leader. But I remember him saying that way back in the 9th grade. And, I think when people express certain things or they see certain things, that's when, expectations come for you to be better. And I just reflect on that, especially when you talked about Kevin Durant's mom. And I have other family members, but I remember that coach, and he still has an impact on me till this day.
As I listen to you reflect there, Deshaun, I'm actually thinking about this young girl. She grew up in the 50s and 60s in the South. Minority, woman. Mm-hmm. She had went through a situation in which she was sexually abused, had gotten in trouble, even went to jail a time or two, had gotten pregnant, had an abortion, etc. Now, if I'd have just told most people that, they would have viewed or speculated that this person's life is going to turn out to be that of being unsuccessful or a tragic situation. However, we know this woman today as Oprah Winfrey. And think about it. And Oprah, when you listen to Oprah, she said, despite all the struggles she went through, she never forgot the words of her grandmother, of you're going to be successful. You are a special child, and God is your father. And she never forgot that. Just like these words that you're reminiscing from the coach. And so we as leaders or people in that leadership position has to understand that words, of course, can weigh tremendously, especially of that on young ears, and impact their life, maybe not at that moment, but maybe years, that seed that has been planted that they never forget. And so I was just thinking about that, Deshaun, when you were reflecting for us.
Yes, I wanted to ask you, Dr. Wax, who needs leadership?
Everyone. I tell you, I'm presently surprised when someone joins my leadership training and I hear them state, of course, in the midst of their training, that they had never considered themselves a leader until they enrolled in one of my courses. I teach my clients to think as a 360-degree leader. And here's what I mean. If you can visualize a circle, we all have our circle of influence, with yourself being right in the middle of that particular circle. I tell them first and foremost, we focus on self-leadership, ourselves. But then as we look below us, we influence and begin to affect those whether we mentor them, lead them, teach them, or our children, or it could be employees. We have out to our equal sides, those that are beside us, whether they're peers, friends, associates that we influence, they're on that equal playing field with us. And then we have that leadership, what I call that North Compass, right to the top, in which we have individuals, whether it be our other leaders, our mentors, or supervisors, owners, customers. Of course, it varies depending on the person. But I teach individuals to think that particular way, because we're always influencing that particular circle. And our goal is to grow ourselves right in the center, and thus begin to grow that circle of influence. And so everyone needs leadership.
back in November, I went to this Portland Podcasters Conference, and I think I was on probably episode 8 or 9. You know, we have a mutual friend and colleague, Sean Jenkins.
Yes.
And I think this conference was right before I met him and had him on my show. So I'm literally like, I go to this conference and I'm just going to listen. I don't take a pad. I don't even take a pen. I just made up my mind. I'm just going to go listen and observe. You know, I didn't have any expectations except, but to do that and learn a few things. And in the middle of the conference, the gentleman that was helping facilitate it, he was like, there's like 70 people in there. And he's like, raise your hand if you have a podcast, if you already have a podcast. And it seems like it took me about a whole 60 seconds to raise my hand, man. But
surveying the room first.
Yeah. But it was literally like from that point on, I got bombarded with questions throughout the day because I was already doing it and in the process. And then before it ended, I got invited to be on this Portland Podcasters Roundtable. So I've been able to help people as far as the process of podcasting and what it takes and, just that whole process. And it put me in a position to, a leadership position where I had some influence. People are listening to me and they see what I'm going through. And I've been able to really help some people and help more going into the future with their podcast, man. So I was reading the book and just thinking about having our show today, it was allowing me to reflect on that process of like, I just got thrown into this leadership position, but what was I doing to get there? And I was just going through this process of podcasting and wanting to learn more.
And what you're stating is actually, part of leadership. You are developing yourself in this specific area and you are growing. Where most people, they generally talk about starting a podcast, right? I'm going to start a podcast. And then 4 months later, you see them and they're still in that start mode. They haven't launched. But of course, through your starting this particular podcast, you're growing and thus being able to assist and impact and, as you state, influence those who want to start, who want to grow with you in this particular industry.
Yes. I want you to talk to the student athlete and the parent, Dr. Wax. Why should the student athlete start thinking about now as a 9th or 10th grader to develop their leadership skills?
That's certainly a great question. And keeping in mind my definition of leadership as influence. And here's the thing. First, we must have the necessary skills to not only influence and lead others, but ourselves as well. I was out at a conference, and this was in July, and I had the opportunity to meet Jessica Clay. Jessica Clay, she holds Olympic and world records in Paralympic Olympic competition. And she was sharing her story with me. As a young girl, I think at age 7, she was involved in a car accident. And unfortunately, it severed her spine. Thus, she could no longer walk. The friend with her was also injured. And the mother, unfortunately, which was her friend's mother, was killed in that particular accident. And so she had a new reality, not only she, but her entire family. And she was talking about the first year was a struggle. Every night, she said her father would come in her room and just say, Jessica, okay, just wiggle your toes, just move. And she said she finally got to a point to where she had accepted a new reality, but her father had not. And she said one night, here he comes up into her room, just like he did every night. And, at this particular stage, I think she's maybe 8 or 9 years old. And he's saying, okay, just wiggle your toes. Just believe you can do it. And she said she finally had the courage to look at him and said, Dad, I'm never going to walk again. I've accepted this. Now it's time for you to accept it. And he said he had tears in his eyes and looking at her. And she says, just because I can't move my legs, this doesn't mean I can't make an impact, to make a difference, and have a very fulfilling life. And so she goes on, she sets goals that she wants to get back into competition. Prior to her injury, She was in this ballerina or something in some type of competitive sport, but she wanted to get back involved. So this young girl influences her father. He begins to coach her. She begins to compete, goes on to win these world records, and now she's out, doing a motivational speaking and impacting lives. And of course, telling people, hey, regardless of the setbacks you get in life, you can still get up and make a difference and have a totally new outcome. It's all about perspective. So to my, young athletes, I would say that. Remember, they're right in the middle of that circle, and above them may be the coach or may be the parent. So they too can have influence going up. And to those around them, that fellow athlete or friend or family member, to be able to encourage them, to influence them to do positive things. And if they have younger brothers or sisters and or they're active in their community or church, those younger people who may be looking up to them, to inspire them to be more. And so I would say that to the young athlete, or whether it is the parent, that influence allows us to be able to lead someone and guide someone to have a more purposeful and fulfilling life and aspire to bring out the best that is within them. And I'll give you one example about that influence, Sean. I took a trip to Atlanta last year, actually, and I took my son. He was about 9. He was 9 at the time. He's 10 now. And so I took him over, and we went, of course, to visit the Martin Luther King, the museum, and the home. And going there, everything I had read, all of the television shows that I had watched as it relates to Dr. King, of course, he was someone who had very meager means, meaning, of course, he wasn't living this extravagant life. So, in my mind, I thought that's the way he grew up. When I arrived to see his home, it is this 3-story. It's 6,000 square feet, and I find out he was actually from a very affluent family. And so I'm thinking about this picture. His father was a businessman, a minister, highly successful, owned vast amounts of real estate, lived on the richest African American street in the nation there in Atlanta. These big, beautiful homes. And so after we finished, I'm sitting there and I asked the guide, I said, with Dr. King coming from this affluent background, I said, what caused him to live the kind of life that he had lived? In terms of when he won the Nobel Prize, he gave all of his money back to the cause. He never accepted extravagant gifts or funds. And it was all related to the influence that Mahatma Gandhi and that whole movement he had, that Dr. King had studied, had upon him.
Yes.
And then Dr. King, of course, being this young man, studying Mahatma Gandhi, studying his life, looking at what's going on here in America, began to exert his leadership skills, beginning there in his community, and of course grew to this entire movement that affected some of the laws that are here in our nation. And so, everyone needs to develop those leadership skills, whether it's to influence, again, your fellow athlete, to influence whether it's your son, your daughter, or the people on your team, or even a nation. It's so important.
Yes, sir. What would you say to the coach? What are 2 ways that a coach could develop or further enhance or refine their leadership skills outside of the positional standpoint in terms of moving to a level 5? Where would they start at?
Wow. As a coach, I would say this. I was just watching, I think it was maybe First Take, and Nick Saban was one of the guests. And they were asking him what are some of the ways that he's still continuing to grow and what does he do? And he says, first and foremost, that he has mentors that he, of course, works with in the off season. Everyone from Bill Belichick, someone whom he coached under and had I think it was about maybe a 30-year relationship, So first and foremost, I would say to coaches, surround themselves with fellow mentors who can, pour their wisdom into the particular coach, depending on where the coach is at in their career. Uh, and also to practice what the Japanese refer to as kaizen, which is constant and never ending improvement in their personal development. And I would, encourage them to have a process of ongoing leadership training, and to be able to understand and connect with our kids here in today's society. And to understand, of course, that leadership is also about servant leadership, and it's about enhancing and impacting the lives of the individuals who are following you. And so I would encourage those two would be the first two things or two ways to develop the leadership skills.
Explain that Kaizen. Did you say that was Japanese?
Yes, it actually occurred when after following the war, Kaizen. Following the war, I mean, Japan was ravaged. I mean, the entire country had been decimated. A couple of nuclear bombs had been dropped right in the cities. And so they wanted to develop a mentality in their culture that would allow them to build back their nation. And so they came up with this term Kaizen, which is constant and never ending improvement. And so they began to focus on that. And out of that came like Toyota and Honda, and all of these companies emerged from that particular country as a result of this mentality. But it's that constant and never ending improvement. Again, whether it's LeBron James, you can look at a Tom Brady, correct? Or,
Yes.
If you're an athlete, or if you're a coach, you can look at a Nick Saban. This guy is still working hard. And I'm amazed when I hear the athletes from Alabama State, it's 10 o'clock at night or 11 at night, and he's still sitting in his office, focused on getting better, which inspires and creates a culture for all of those around you to do the same. And as you said, you've been reading the 21 laws. It's that law of the lid, right? The organization cannot grow past that of the leader, and that if the coach expects the athlete to have that mentality of constantly getting better, then certainly you'd want the athletes to see you doing that, to see you emulating those actions, to see you pushing yourself to be the best that you can possibly be in that realm.
Just you sharing that story, man, it reminds me of an elder that I met probably about 15 or 16 years ago working out in the gym. And we had a chance to build a rapport, and he would share books that he was reading at the time, and we would kind of go back and forth. But one of his phrases, or almost like a mantra, so to speak, was school is never out and class is always in session. So like constant learning, man, and constant improvement. So I like that word, man, and that's an incredible story behind it at the same time.
Hey, I like that saying. I'm going to remember that.
Yep. When we're talking about the student, we're back to the student athlete. When should we begin developing our leadership skills? When looking at the student athlete at like 8th grade, 9th grade.
I tell you, I probably would have had a different answer for you than the one I'm about to give you, but I'll give you the story behind it. In short, I'm going to say right now. And this is why I say that. I took a trip out last year to meet with my mentors. And one of my mentors in particular had brought his two kids. He wasn't from this southeastern area. So he had brought his two kids, so they were going to enjoy Disney while, of course, we were all there meeting. And we began talking about our kids. His daughter was the same age as my son, who was 9 at the time. And he also had a son who was, I think, about 11 or 12. And we were sitting there talking, and he said, man, he said, I've got my kids right now. They've been studying for the past 2 or 3 years the 21 Laws of Leadership, and start naming a couple of books. Every year they have to read that. And we talk about it. He said, I'm molding them and shaping them. Now, here's a guy, Deshaun, who's making millions a year, millions. And I'm sitting up there listening to him, speak to me about his children. They, of course, had introduced the kids to me. And I'm thinking now, reflecting on my son, who was 9 at the time. And I'm thinking, okay, I've got him, of course, studying, whether it's the history of books about Dr. Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks, all the way over to Walt Disney. So I've got him focused on history. But I'm looking at this guy who's making millions a year, who's my mentor. He has his kids focused on leadership, preparing them to be leaders. And I thought, wow. And so when I immediately got back, I bought some leadership books and personal development books that I thought were age appropriate for my son and where he's at, to begin that process of developing that leadership perspective in him. Whether if you're an athlete, I mean, you're on the court, you're working with other individuals, you got to be able to influence them. You're a leader. You're a leader. And you have to always keep that in mind. Our young people. And our young people one day, of course, are going to grow up and actually going to be making an impact and a difference in society. So I say it's never too young to start individuals molding and growing as leaders.
Yeah, that's incredible, man. I'm getting on to chapter 5 in the book, and that's the law of addition. I haven't started this yet. I'm going to start that one later today, probably this evening. But chapter 5 is the law of addition. Leaders add value by serving others. What do you think about when you hear that?
I think about the fact that it's not about us. It's about making a difference in the lives of others. For instance, listening to you earlier, when you were talking about all of a sudden you're being cast in this leadership position at the conference, your particular goal, of course, was to help others, to give them that knowledge and to assist in any way you can. And so, we as leaders got to have that servant leader mentality to go out and inspire. When I was on my exercise bike this morning, and I decided to listen to a podcast from Eric Thomas. I don't know if you know Dr. Eric Thomas. Call me ET. Okay, great. I had a lot of individuals in my leadership group that kept talking about ET. You got to listen to ET.
Yeah.
And so I decided, okay, today, this day, I'm going to listen to ET. And listening to him and hearing his story about the fact that he was homeless, eating out of a garbage can. However, a pastor whose church he went to occasionally, because he wasn't a regular member, a regular attendee, saw something in him, spoke positive words in his life, grew, and that he never forgot, and also extended a hand to help him go back and get his GED. Then on to college. Now, of course, he has his PhD. Right. And Eric then developed a passion, saying to himself, I got to go back and help others. It's up to me now, upon me, to go back and do what was done for me. And then, of course, to go out and be speaking for 18 years, and for someone at one of his speeches to tape it and to put it online and for it to go viral. I think it has over 30 plus million views right now to date. And of course, we all know his name now, ET. It just shows that particular power and reasoning of developing our leadership skills and the impact it can have. And it all began because of the words of a local pastor wanting to make a difference in a young man's life that he saw was struggling.
Yeah, man, he's been a major influence, not only to myself, listening to, his story numerous times and listening to that video that went viral. And I will often play a lot of his soundtracks and MP3s when I train and work with my athletes. So I'm very familiar with Eric Thomas, and even he has a podcast now. I think it's him. I think his business partners, CJ and Carl, where they kind of all host it together. But some real good material, man. His story is a great story, living in Detroit, cold Detroit, and being homeless, and then going to Michigan State. So, he's done some incredible work and has been, a great addition to, he's an influencer.
You're absolutely right, Sean. And one message I think that really hits home, and I know in one of the podcasts, he was speaking to a group of athletes, and he was making the point about how, first pointing the challenges and struggles he went through to get to where he's at. But then he pointed out to them, they're in a privileged position, whether in high school, college, or wherever it may be, an opportunity, to develop their talents, to receive that education and to grow and be whatever they want to be to make a difference. And there's no excuses. There's no excuses. We all have our challenges. We all have our hills that we've had to climb, our negative impacts from our background. But unfortunately, in society, it's up to you. Right? You have to first make up your mind that you're going to take advantage of all the opportunities that are coming your way, whether it's basketball, football, softball, whatever it may be, that this is your opportunity to develop your skills and to get that education at the same time, to develop a better path in life for yourself, your family, or whatever it may be, and to never reach a point of being satisfied. And I thought that was a very inspiring message that he was delivering when I was listening to it earlier today.
So you got to stay inspired, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Take advantage of every opportunity. Be relentless about that and figure out ways to stay inspired. Figure out ways to keep learning. You're going to have to go back and listen to this episode again with Dr. Benjamin Wax. Today we've talked about what is leadership, who needs leadership, why should we develop our leadership skills, what are 2 ways to develop our leadership skills, and when should we begin developing our leadership skills? Dr. Wax, before we close out, what would be 3 book recommendations for our audience out there?
Okay. For the coaches or adults or anyone, I'm going to just say at a frame of 17 and up, I would say first, as it relates to leadership, The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership by Dr. John Maxwell, the book you were referencing earlier. I think that's an excellent book to begin that leadership journey. Another book, The 7 Habits of Highly Successful People by Dr. Stephen Covey. And then finally, Unlimited Power by Tony Robbins, which sort of helps you work on that self-development, unleashing that unlimited potential that resides in each one of us. And for the younger audience, I would say Rhinoceros Success by Stephen Scott. It's a very, very easy read. And this is actually a book that I started my son on, who's on right now, 10. He's going to be required to read it once a year, along with a host of other books I have for him. The 7 Habits of Highly Successful Teens. They have that particular version now, which is an easier read, and having those habits and developing and laying that foundation to be successful in life. And I will probably say maybe Unlimited Power by Tony Robbins would be a good one to consider. And this, of course, is excluding all of the spiritual types of books and just focusing on the leadership and those particular habits and personal development.
I appreciate it, man. Audience, if you're listening, you'll be able to find these links in all of our show notes. And the last and not least, how can we learn more about you? What websites, what links should they go to? Tell us what you're up to and how to learn more about your programs.
Great. Thank you for asking. And if your audience would just send me an email at info@benjaminwax.com. Again, info@benjaminwax.com. They'll get an instant reply, and they'll get a link to my website, Facebook page. They can go to my website. I have a free gift form. They can enroll in that. As well as if they reference this particular show, I'll be more than happy to set them up in an upcoming leadership training free of charge.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, you've heard it here first with Dr. Benjamin Wax. All you have to do is email him, and you will get some tremendous treats. info@benjaminwax.com. My role is to help student athletes develop the mental skills for success in sports, which carry over to their life as well. I work with normal people who are under additional perceived pressures to perform in their sport. My goals are to teach student athletes how to be more confident, focus better, stay composed under pressure, practice more efficiently, and develop more effective pre-game routines. I become an extension of the athlete's support team. Unlike a psychotherapist or psychologist, I do not use couches, prescribe medicines, or work with abnormal behavior. The main difference between my sports mastery program and a psychotherapist is that I work with athletes on sports performance enhancement. I tend not to get into personal challenges such as divorce, breakups, grief counseling, or abnormal behavior. Although those areas of life do affect sports performance, when need be, they are addressed. My philosophy is that you cannot separate the mental from the physical when it comes to performance. After all, decisions, thoughts, images, and feelings drive motor behavior. So how do you know when you need or could benefit from my sports mastery program? My goal is to help the student athlete identify barriers to hard work, identify barriers to teamwork, and enhance sports performance by improving mental skills for success. Do you have any doubts about your sport before or during competition? Do you get so anxious that you don't have a calm mind or think straight in competition? Become easily frustrated when things do not go according to plan? So when you consider these questions, the next obvious question is this: when is my sports mastery program needed? You don't perform well when others are watching you. The sports mastery program is needed when you maintain doubt about your sport before or during games. You feel anxious or scared when you perform in competition. So how can the student athlete benefit from the sports mastery coaching program? They will have improved focus and the ability to concentrate and manage distractions. Develop systems and strategies to increase confidence and eliminate doubts and fears. Develop coping skills to deal with setbacks and errors. Find the right zone of intensity for their sport. The student athlete will also learn to develop and enhance communication skills. The student athlete will benefit by learning to develop a healthy belief system and identify irrational thoughts. The student athlete would also benefit when they learn to improve and balance motivation for optimal performance, develop confidence post-injury. The student athlete will benefit from my sports mastery program by learning to identify and enter the zone more often. At the end of the day, my sports mastery program does not apply to a wide variety of athletes. This program is for the serious athletes only. Most of my student athletes are in junior high, high school, and college. However, they are highly committed to excellence in seeing how far they can go in their sports. My sports mastery program is not something they need, it's something that they want. These student athletes love competition and testing themselves against the best in their sport. They understand the importance of positive attitude and mental toughness. These student athletes want every possible advantage they can get, including the mental edge over competition. The first thing we do is identify the student athlete's hopes and dreams, pains and fears, and barriers and limitations. This serves as a guideline and helps the student athlete to think about mindset. When we first meet in person or virtually, I ask more questions about mindset and beliefs based on assessment results, so we can develop a complete picture of your mental game. Once the game plan is developed, we will begin our work on mental skills that apply to your current and specific challenges. I present a sports mastery program that is customized to the athlete's individual needs. I always include the core foundation mental skills for all of my athletes. We apply the sports mastery concepts and skills to practice, pre-performance preparation, warm-up routines, and post-performance assessments. The next step is to decide if my sports mastery program is something you want. Not everyone wants to take the time to learn about mindset and how it affects an individual sports performance. I can tell you by participating in my sports mastery program, you'll set yourself apart from other student athletes. I help the student athlete transform, shake their limiting beliefs, silence monkey mind chatter, and equip them with the tools to succeed. Sports Mastery will provide you with the tools to maximize your game in competition and in the classroom. To learn more, visit sportsmastery.com/coaching.